Hey guys, this is IC Topic Chats 200. 200. Can you guys believe that? We've been doing this for 200 years. We started 200 years. Golly, 200 sessions. I can't imagine 200 years. I don't know what that would look like. Can you imagine what our interactive meetings will look like 200 years from now? We'll probably be sitting in the same room as like virtual bodies or something. Who knows? Star Wars kind of stuff. But the IC Topic Chat started in May of 2020, and we've been meeting pretty much every week, 48 times a year since then, and it hasn't stopped, and it seems to be only getting stronger and stronger as we go along. I couldn't think of a better way to think about celebrating this than to ask one of our elder stateswomen to join us today, who's been around since before there was an AEA, before the AEA had even started. And so we have Melanie here. Melanie is with Spec Associates, and she started her firm in, wait for it, 1980. Who was alive in 1980? Maybe half of us, but a lot of us were not. I know that, right? So I think that's super cool. I can't imagine doing anything for 44 years. It's just unbelievable that you've been doing that for a long time. So Melanie, I thank you. Welcome. And why don't we just jump into this interview? We've got this set up as an interview today. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? And I see you've already put up a slide, so you probably have some notes for us to follow. And I see your granddaughters there, very cute. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, Melanie?
Sure. And just to let you know that the button that I'm wearing is not something I wear with clients. This is my go-to family, so I feel comfortable here. I am a 73-year-old single white woman, and I say that up front because my understanding now of the quant crit movement and the movement for accessibility, think about people who might be blind, for example, that describing yourself is a good thing, and it gives you a context for how you see the world or how a publication was made or how data were analyzed. And I have seen in training videos people describing themselves. So that said, and I'm also on a bandwagon to fight against ageism. So right up front, I'm saying I'm a 73-year-old single white woman. I received my PhD in 1980 from Wayne State University, studied applied social psychology, fell in love with psychometrics a long time ago, and have gone through the certified evaluator designation at the Canadian Evaluation Society. Highly recommend it. It's something that I market because we don't have one in the United States, a national certification. That's another discussion topic for down the road. I was on the board. I designed and I teach the evaluation management course at Michigan State University's program evaluation, master's degree and certificate program in program evaluation. I was a Peace Corps volunteer. I find that a lot of evaluators were Peace Corps volunteers. I do and have lived in Detroit. I've raised 2 children, and there you see the picture of my grandchildren. So,
all right, good session. Any questions? We just covered it all, didn't we? I'm just joking with you, Melanie. Now you just covered your whole thing. So tell us a little bit about Spec Associates.
Okay.
I know it stands for Social Program Evaluators and Consultants, right?
Social Program Evaluators and Consultants Incorporated is our legal name. And our AKA name is Spec Associates. So I'm going to show you a little timeline of the significant events in my life, and it will be interesting. There you could see 3 different logos. You can see our original logo, a logo we switched to in '83, and a logo we switched to in 2003. You could see the first one, right? That's something I had to clip off of a PDF of a very original report we did, because at the time I started, there was no fax machine, there was no PC. We literally had an electric typewriter at least, but we had landline phones, and I literally cut and pasted when I had to do reports. So that's
so for you guys out there who talk about cutting and pasting with the little mouse and you go over, we literally had to cut. Snip, snip, snip with scissors. That was literal cutting and then pasting with glue on pages, and then with Xerox machines.
Yes, we did. We had some Xerox machines that still had that paper in between, and the heated, if you remember, you put it in and then you peel off the ink paper, the carbon copy. Still
I
have
love it.
carbon copies. See, some of you are
Carbon
saying yes.
copies.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
I
when I
love it.
started. There was no AEA. I was a social psychologist. I got an applied social psychology degree, but my doctoral committee had no idea what applied social psychology was. So I was out in the field doing things, and they just gave me a stamp of approval because they didn't really know what to do with me.
Yeah, I don't think people realize when they email the kind of like the history of memos, right? When I first was a grad student in the 90s, we typed up memos. I got to do it on computers. We were pretty fancy that way, but we would print them, and then the CC literally carbon copy. That's what you would literally carbon copy that to somebody else. You type it, and then you could rip it off, and you could have several pages. I had the advantage of hitting print, and it would print out in a printer, but we would initial it and we'd put it in university mail. You guys remember the university mail envelopes that had like 15 different things you had to write it on, and then you mark out the people that it had already gone to, and then put it back in the mail. A little guy walk around with a cart, stick it in there. Anyway, it's fun to talk about these things. I'm
You're
sorry,
like
I'm jumping off.
a-
I'm off like normal. I'm already off on a different tangent, so I'm gonna let you get back into it. But tell us some more about some of these
Yeah.
big milestones you've got here. These are cool.
So you're older than you look.
Thank you.
So we started in graduate school. There were 4 PhD students. One had a roommate who was a law student. We started a partnership. The other 3 people went on their way to a professional career, one to Saudi Arabia, one to Texas, one to California, and left me kind of standing, and I had a contract then. So I met up with I immediately created an advisory group, highly recommended, of people that were my friends that also knew about business and about research. And one of them had a husband who worked with the Small Business Administration group, a local one, and told me about business planning. And that's how we kind of set off to be a Michigan Subchapter S corporation in 1983. Then we changed our logo to be a little bit more looking like what we did, which is data. And I started, actually, I was the part-time person, and I hired a full-time person who was a specialist in survey design and interviewing. She had worked with the survey research firm, Karmanos Cancer Institute, and was part of the research group there. So I had my technical expertise with me. Something big happened in 1997. We applied, and one thing I would recommend is go for big if you really want to do something exciting. So we applied to do a publication for the United Way of America on program evaluation, a program evaluation guidebook, workbook sort of thing. We applied, we lost to the Urban Institute, which is a pretty big, they're the ones who won, right? But the group that was the group of people who rated the proposals happened to include Girl Scouts of the USA. So after we lost, someone from Girl Scouts of the USA called, said, "We liked your proposal. We want to hire you to do work with Girl Scouts of the USA." One thing to remember then, you never know who's going to read that proposal. Make sure it's the best you can do. If you can't put a good proposal together, don't even submit it. And the other thing, she chastised me. She said, "Do you know what it took to find you? You didn't put any contact information on your proposal." So that was the second lesson I learned. Make sure that whatever you put out there makes it easy for people to find you. Of course, now website, it's easy. Back in those days, it wasn't. So when you lose, don't worry about it. Sometimes it leads to a big win. We did 17 years of work with Girl Scouts of the USA.
Lord.
So it took us all over the country, and I learned my most favorite was asking an older Girl Scout what was the outcome she received from being in this national program, and her answer was memories. So I just thought that was cool. And that's where I learned that fun is an okay outcome, although I couldn't convince Girl Scouts to measure fun, but I was convinced that a good outcome for, especially, even programs for grown-ups is fun. So then you see, we changed we hired a marketing company to change our logo here. We didn't like the other logo for a couple of reasons. First, there was no color in it, and second, the lines all went down. So we wanted to give the impression that we are data oriented and that there is a line that goes up to give you an uplifting feel. If you work with us, you might have data that looks that way. And then in 2004, I received a call from a graduate student at Wayne State University who wanted to interview me about the possibility of getting an internship I ended up hiring Victoria, and it was a perfect match, like yin and yang, because I was always interested in doing the work and she was interested in growing a business. So she has the business acumen. She is the one who does all of the invoicing and bookkeeping and budgeting and contracting for the organization, and I just get to do the work. So having that, both of those skills, I think, is incredibly important.
And quick aside, Victoria will be joining us in the beginning of next month in October for our contract session. So I've done this by myself for many years, but I was always referencing things that Melanie had put out there. And I said, here's some things that Melanie put out there. And actually it was Victoria's work that Melanie had put out. And I say put out there, she presented it on the independent consulting listserv, the community board that we all share to, but it was all Victoria's work. So I invited her to come back and for us to have this conversation. I have no idea what we're going to talk about yet, but she's here today, and she's off camera because she's, I think, moving. So no need to come off on camera or to come off mute, Victoria. But thank you for that. But she will be presenting with me. We'll be co-presenting next month.
Right. In 2008, a wonderful thing happened. Mary Williams, who was, remember the ICTIG, she was an independent consultant, had taken a job at Lumina Foundation, and she needed an evaluator for a big project to do some developmental work. And she went around asking other ICTIG members who they would recommend, and a couple of them pointed to us, and that led to a, 8-year gig with Lumina Foundation to the tune of about $800,000 a year. Huge thing. And we had eight other evaluators. That was the bane of my life, because 8 evaluators don't agree on anything. And so we had to like commonly write memos and commonly write reports, and I was stuck, of course, at the top as managing, figuring out whose feelings am I going to hurt this time when their ideas aren't in that particular memo. That was like this enormous, wonderful experience. There's the people that we worked with. And that's also the time when Mary Williams, again at Lumina Foundation, and I invented our evaluation live model. And I'll talk about that in a second. So that belongs in the timeline there. And
Was
it was
Lumina
also,
in Indianapolis at the time? Because I think they're based in
yeah,
Indianapolis now, right?
Indianapolis.
So you
Yep.
spent a lot
They're
of time
still there.
probably going to Indianapolis.
Pardon me? I meant a lot. Yeah, a lot. Well, not only that, but we did an evaluation of their higher education policy work in 7 different states. So we had 8 evaluators going to 7 different states over a period of about 7 years. So that was pretty awesome. It really did launch me into the idea that big is possible with a little organization. All of them were subcontractors, except for Victoria and I, and we had a support person. So, and it was Lumina Foundation that in 2008, 2009 caused us to turn into a nonprofit organization. As I mentioned, I already had an advisory board, and the foundation kind of said, well, foundations have kind of like 2 pots of money, if I understand it correctly. Some of you probably know more about foundation and funding, but one is for granting, and then one is administrative for contracting and staff and things like that. And they had more money to give away if it was in the grant category than in the administrative category. So if we had turned into a 501c3, it was easier for them to give us this $800,000 a year. And so, sure, and they paid for us to turn into a nonprofit. They paid the fees that it cost us to hire a consultant to do that, and I'll talk about that in a minute too. And then we get to, since then, it's been a great ride. I went back and looked. I have a document. We have a document that catalogs all of our projects since we started in 1981, and I counted them yesterday, and it comes out to 429 in the past 44 years, which is reasonable. That's
429
like
projects.
10 a
Wow.
year. That's not really huge. Pardon?
That's a lot. But yeah, I guess 10, yeah, I hear you, but that's still a lot to kind of wrap your head
Yeah.
around.
So pretty much we've touched on lots of things that people do now.
So you talked about a couple projects that were multiple years. So you were working with the Girl Scouts for, what'd you say, 18 years?
On different projects. Mhm.
Oh, I see. So you would have different projects. We have several projects that are one project 5 years.
Yeah, we have several of those too. We're wrapping up a 10-year project right now.
Mhm.
Yeah, those are nice. Those are nice for cash flow. Yeah. So I put a small giant there because Tessie mentioned that book, Small Giants, because I never had the ambition to grow like she has, right? She's got like 260 employees or something like that. And I've never had that ambition. I just wanted to do good work and make sure I could pay my bills. And 44 years later, we had a couple years where things were tough, a couple years where we missed paychecks. One year, 1993, when I almost gave up because it was a switch. I think that's when Bill Clinton came in, or the year before after he came in to office, and all federal grants ended, and a lot of our money came from federal grants. And so we got really, that was a hard year, but other than that, we've been pretty much able to pay our bills. Little bit about Evaluation Live. As I mentioned, Mary Williams and I were talking about some of these meetings we had at Lumina were like phenomenal. Like you would get in the meeting and before you know it, 90 minutes later, it's done. I don't know if you've ever had that experience. It's related to what Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi calls flow theory, and just the idea that you're in a zone and everything is just like working right and everybody's just intense. And we've had those. These are individual, sessions. This is not like a project as a whole, but you go into a meeting and you have this flow experience. And Mary and I kept talking about it because it happened sometimes with our Lumina work and sometimes it didn't. So we tried to kind of tease out when did these flow experiences happen. And that's where we devised this Evaluation Live model. What brings a whole home evaluation into something that is a flow experience, or Gene King calls breathing life into an evaluation. So we came up with the idea that to become this flow experience, it required certain characteristics of an evaluator. You had to be able to do the work, you had to know about the project, you had to be flexible enough to move with how the client needed you, you had to have good communication skills, and you had to have an open mind, realize that you don't know everything. And on the other hand, the client had to be in a position where they embraced learning, that they were the ones who wanted questions to be answered and drove the questioning. And there had to be a champion in the evaluation among the stakeholders for this to work. And then for the relationship between the evaluator and client to be one of trust, equality, and sharing responsibility. As all of you know, whenever you collect data, it's not only on you, that you need something from your client in order to get that data, whether it be a client list or email that says, please answer the survey, or a database or whatever. So we've been working with the model. If you go to the website, this section here on the bottom, we just don't have time to populate it as much, but this related literature gives you the literature related to each of those lines that we have found. Like I said, it's kind of old, it needs updating. But we're really welcoming people if you want to jump on the bandwagon, and if you notice articles that are related to any part of those parts of the triangle, to let us know, and we'll add it to our related literature. So we kind of follow this model in our work. You asked that I talk about becoming a nonprofit. As I said, we did it around 2009. Victoria does all of the financial work related to this. If you're already an existing for-profit and you want to kind of transfer your leadership and your advisory group into a nonprofit, it becomes a little bit complicated because you have to convince the IRS that you're not doing this only because you don't feel like paying taxes. We hired a consultant. As I mentioned, we were lucky enough that Lumina Foundation was willing to pay the costs of that consultant. I want to say it cost us more than a few $1,000s, not for the original application, but for the questions that came back from the IRS and what we had to do to answer it. The answer itself was about 3 times as thick as the application itself, but we were able to do it. You have to demonstrate that the work that you do is for the common good. It's fairly easy when you're beginning from scratch to demonstrate that, because I don't know about you, but we don't make a lot of money. I mean, we make enough to earn a living, but it's not like a big corporation where we have hundreds of thousands of dollars left over in profit and things like that. So usually our budgets are pretty much you know, right on target. We don't have a lot of leftover money. And so it's easy to demonstrate you're doing good work. Why do we do it? It's good for marketing to be able to say that in your proposals, especially when the potential client is a foundation. It's not always necessary to be a nonprofit to apply. Once in a while it is. I like it because it's more serious financial oversight. You have to be audited, you have to put a 990 together every year, you have to show that your money was spent well, so it keeps you kind of on your toes in terms of your own money management. We get tax-free purchases, so we don't have to pay tax on hotels, on airfare, on purchases of supplies, and like I said, it might be attractive to foundations, and we could come back to that if you want later. And then the last question that you asked, Matt, is how do I manage any personal challenges? And honestly, it's just through gratitude, really. I mean, you think of the world and you think of all the other things that could be happening, and you become very grateful for this group, for one, that you have somebody has your back and you have people you can draw on when you have these big contracts and need subcontractors to work with. And then, of course, your health and your family and the clients who appreciate you and come back to you every once in a while. And so when things get rough, I just kind of think about what I do have instead of what I don't. That's my spiel. That's
So
my
for
thought.
44 years, like what are some of those downturns, things, your personal, where did you just say, don't you ever get to a point where you're like, I don't enjoy this work anymore, I want to do something else? Or is that never happened? And how did you, or do you I mean, when you, don't you hit brick walls or
Yeah.
frustration points? I mean, you talked about how you wanted to leave perhaps in 93 under the Clinton administration, when contracts all came to an end, and that just felt like it was too big of a thing to climb, but you stuck around. But how do you repurpose your energy towards something else when you kind of run into a brick wall? And how, what is your secret to longevity here? Because I can't imagine 44 years.
Well, aside from the financial, which I think Tessie talked about, you know, getting loans, lines of credit, borrowing from family and friends even, people is the problem. We've had contracts where we just don't, the chemistry is just wrong. It's just wrong. And we handed them off to somebody else. We've been fired a few times. We've been handed contracts where the evaluator was fired and then we got fired and handed it up to a third person. I think that to me is the time. And then, like I said, when I was doing Illumina work and I had 8 evaluators and they are all, not all, but a lot of them had, you know, were very ego invested in their ideas. And then I had to figure out how to group it together. That might be a reason why I don't really go after big work anymore. Big work like $800,000 a year is not really fun to me. I mean, I like I don't know, I would say my preferred is something around $50,000 a year. You know, enough to do a good job and not so big that you've got a lot of complexity in it. I don't know what Victoria would think about that or what you guys think, but staying kind of in your lane size wise.
How big is Spec Associates now?
Full-time people or?
However you want to define it.
So, full-time people, there are 3 of us, 1 is part-time, and then we use a slew of consultants. So I don't know how you define that. We probably use 5 or 6 consultants. All of the people on staff are professional evaluators. All the other work we do, data entry, transcripts, all that stuff, bookkeeping, all of that stuff is all contracted out. In terms of revenues, we can say that because you can look up our 990. I want to say we're in the ballpark of about $400,000 to $500,000 a year.
Is that where you want to be? Do you like, is that, or do you want to be bigger? Or are you perfectly happy at that number? Or maybe you want to scale back? What are your thoughts on how do you purpose
perfectly
it?
happy at this number. I don't know what Victoria would say, but I'm perfectly
On the
happy
business
at
side of
this
things.
number.
Yeah, I understand.
I am, and we've made I think almost exclusively through AEA and the ICT. We've made such good partnerships with people that it's pretty easy to put a good team together now to go after things.
How do you think about the difference between having somebody on subcontract versus hiring them to be a full-time professional employee?
I like subcontractors because they're one and dones. We do it and then we don't have to worry about making sure we have enough income to pay their payroll.
Oh,
We need
Victoria put
somebody.
in there. She's happy about the volume of business right now, by the way. She just put a little
Okay.
in the chat. So you don't have to
I
worry
mean,
about Victoria's perspective.
thanks, Vic. We manage all the work though. We direct all the work. We don't subcontract out management.
So you're kind of like the general contractor, for lack of a better way
Exactly.
of putting it. You don't subcontract. You are not a subcontractor for somebody else who would be the primary, is what you're saying.
Exactly. And 99% of the time, either me or Victoria or both of us are on meetings with clients. We
I
don't
see.
give that away.
Now, have you hired subcontractors to become full-time employees, and how do you make that decision if you do?
Oh, Victoria, maybe we hired. No,
Nope,
we
don't do
know of
that.
their work. We know of them. We look at their work. We've hired someone who was an internal evaluator in another organization. So I guess it's a little different, but she was looking to leave, so we snatched her up. We do it, of course, we wouldn't take somebody away from a client if, we wouldn't like steal somebody. Because we met lots of
Right.
internal evaluators, but this was a situation where the client was fine and we were fine, so.
Yeah, we have that built into our contracts that our clients won't try and steal our folks away from us, and we in turn won't try and steal people away from our clients. It's a typical contract thing. Victoria was saying that you don't hire very often, so this isn't really kind of a piece of the conversation. Tell us a little bit about how AEA has changed since you saw it begin from its origins to where it is today. What are some things that you've noticed over time?
I think AEA has, thanks for asking that, because I've been thinking about that for a long time. AEA has changed to me from an organization that's focused on methods and theories of evaluation. When it started, it was very much academic and very much focused on methodology. And now I think AEA is much more focused on more social justice, I would say. There's a strong social justice bent to AEA. Not that those of us who do evaluators aren't thinking about social justice, but it wasn't talked about in the past as much as it is now. They actually even changed, I think, some of their competencies or guidelines or something, guiding principles to have social justice more in there. That's my big theme.
Sure. How about the independent consulting group? What did it look like back at the beginning, in the beginning days? How did it even start? Because I don't think I've talked to Gail Barrington a couple times about this, but I don't think I remember really the origins of the TIG.
Yeah, I think it was maybe Gail, Debbie Bonnet, myself. Those were the days where there were hardly any TIGs. And we just needed that community. We needed somebody who could we could talk to about our business issues. How do you market? What do you sell? How do you explain yourself? Where do you go? What do you do? And remember now, those were the days where we didn't have computers and we didn't have Zoom. We had paper physical brochures that we put in a physical envelope and we put a label on it and sent to people. That was how we marketed.
Did you have
And
conference calls back then with one another? No, nothing like that. Just saw
these
each other,
personal meetings at AEA.
just the in-person meetings at AEA once a year. So you didn't have the opportunity to connect as frequently as we do now.
Not at all. And to that brochure, 2 years later, somebody called me. Some guy got a new job and was going through the files of the old guy and pulled out my brochure. So you never know where your marketing materials will land.
That's hilarious. I think this is probably a good time for me to get into what I call my James Lipton questions. These are questions I ask of all of our interviewees and our co-hosts and our guest hosts. And so for those who don't know, James Lipton was and maybe still is a presenter for Inside the Actor Studio, which was on Bravo. And I guess there's actually a history of Inside the Actor Studio in England and in France before it even came to Bravo in the United States. And so he asks a series of the same questions of every one of his guests. And I ask these two questions every time about independent consulting. So Melanie, if you had to start all over, I know that must be mind blowing for you to think of now, and you didn't have your network of clients and colleagues, how would you get started with a consulting practice? And this is a question for our people who are at their earliest stages of just getting started. And what am I supposed to do? So what kind of advice do you give to those folks?
But assuming we have what we have now, back then.
Correct. No, I'm just saying as in 2024, if you were a 30-year-old PhD, just a little bit of experience, but you don't have this, lifetime of experience that you have now, how would you get started?
Well, for sure, I would join this group. Not only to learn about what it is to have a small business, but to let myself be known, what my skills are. Especially, I think, like, I don't know about you guys, but these skills that you like either need extra help or you need extra expertise. So I have a strong background in aging, for example, gerontology. So plus I have lived experience. So if there was something in gerontology or an aging that somebody needed some help with, either just to think or to actually design something, then, I would let that be known to my subject matter expertise. And in terms of skills, I have more just generic evaluation skills. So it would have to be somebody who needed just an extra pair of hands to like do an online survey or something like that. But this group, number one. Number two, I would spend my time going to in-person conferences that had the kinds of clients I wanted. If I could only go to one conference, I'm sorry, AEA would not be AEA because I had this group. I would go to like youth development conference or a conference on aging programs, or where people would have who might be looking for evaluators. And I would have my physical card, although people don't use physical cards, they take a picture of your card now. But and I would do the personal networking with the groups that in person. Yeah. And clearly I would have an advisory group. We as a nonprofit, we have an advisory group, a lot of nonprofits, but we checked on our IRS application that we are not taking donations. We could technically, legally take donations. We don't want to compete with our clients, but our board members are expected to link us to potential clients, and they definitely have.
So that's a good use of a board. And I don't know if you guys were listening, but this was a clever way that she talked about. She answered the question, but she also pitched her ability to support other people. So that was very a great way of putting that, Melanie. So if you have any interest in and need any connection around ageism gerontology, she's Spec Associates, and Melanie in particular is somebody for you. From your perspective, is now September 2024 a good time to start an independent consulting practice?
Yes.
Why?
Because the need out there is huge, and right, but starting a business, isn't it? Finding the need and filling it. That's what it's all about. I just don't think it's going away. If anything, it's getting bigger.
There's going to be more and more opportunity, you think?
Yeah. And I think just even now, to my button, the new economic development plan for small businesses that Kamala Harris unveiled yesterday that she plans to promote if she's right. One of them is like 1/3 of federal money to go to small businesses. Well, there you go, right?
I didn't hear about that. Okay.
Yep, and different deductions you can get for business startup costs, and yeah, absolutely.
Well, we're going to continue this conversation, but I'm going to stop the recording. So I'm going to say goodbye to all those people out in YouTube world. Thank you for stopping by. Everybody else who's live, stick around.